Across the globe, massive groups of impoverished voters routinely march to the polls to elect the exact leaders who actively ignore their material survival. Observers often point to this blind loyalty and describe these voting blocs as herds of sheep or goats. They assume this dynamic is a simple flaw in the democratic process or a failure of political messaging. But an examination of how these political campaigns operate reveals a deliberate, engineered architecture. Combining severe poverty with uncritical loyalty creates a highly efficient system design, yielding a completely exploitable vote bank. Denying a population access to quality education removes their capacity to evaluate complex metrics, like economic policy or long-term governance. When the mental pathway to evaluate policy is blocked, voters are forced to route decisions through inherited identity markers, like religion and caste. Politicians exploit this, feeding a continuous loop of emotional rhetoric, entirely bypassing tangible resources. Widespread illiteracy operates as the required fuel for this system, allowing the political elite to maintain power without the burden of accountability. In 1942, Dr. B. R. Ambedkar introduced a precise formula engineered to break this specific architecture of exploitation. This sequence represents his mandate. It is a strict, sequential blueprint: educate, agitate, and organize. The sequence is deliberate. Education is the non-negotiable first step because it establishes the analytical baseline that allows the subsequent stages to function. Attempting to jump straight to agitation or organization without critical thinking simply feeds energy back into the corrupt political machine. Agitating without education devolves into blind rioting that lacks a coherent structural target. An uneducated, angry crowd is highly susceptible to manipulation. The politicians responsible for their oppression easily step in, co-opting the movement and redirecting that anger toward manufactured enemies. Similarly, organizing an uneducated group causes them to default back to familiar, easily manipulated tribal lines based on caste or religion. Education changes the organizing principle. It provides disparate groups with the vocabulary to recognize shared economic and social interests that cross over their inherited identities. Intellect serves as the necessary catalyst, transforming a manipulatable crowd back into a functioning, demanding democracy. What exactly happens to a political establishment when its electorate finally learns to read the data? The architecture of ignorance collapses. The emotional grip of identity politics breaks down, losing its power to dictate voter behavior. Voters adopt rigorous new metrics. They begin demanding tangible accountability for healthcare access, civil infrastructure, and fundamental human rights. To stay in power, politicians are suddenly required to deliver complex material results, which completely destroys the low-effort vote bank model. An educated public actively rejects the old, identity-based methods of control. This reality redefines the act of acquiring an education inside a corrupt system. Society typically frames schooling as a personal economic tool used to secure employment and personal wealth. Yet within a system designed around exploitation, learning carries a severe political weight. The act of developing critical thinking is a direct, highly calculated attack on an architecture built specifically to exploit you. True education strips away the mechanisms of control, transforming a disposable pawn into the political establishment's greatest fear.